Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Nicole and I typically like to do fashion DIYs, and in today's video I am doing one of my favorite projects, which is reworking a men's dress shirt. I love doing this type of project because there are so many different possibilities, and the nice thing is you never really have to worry about how to get in and out of your garment because it always has buttons. So you can do the whole button route if you don't feel like installing a zipper. And that is exactly what I'm going to be working on today. So I'm going to be doing something that is a little bit different today, which is using a pattern that I actually purchased and not one that I am making from scratch. I was recently inspired by Transformations by Tracy. I'm going to link her handles, Instagram and YouTube down below. I actually follow her on Instagram, so I stumbled across one of her patterns and decided to try it out for myself, and I made this really cute top from it. I did do quite a few adjustments to the pattern itself, mostly because the bust area is much too large for my lack of bust, so I really needed to minimize that part. And I also added a shearing panel into the back just to give myself a little bit of wiggle room with the size. So I am actually going to show you guys how I reworked the pattern so it better fit my bust, and I am also going to be extending the pattern because I am making it into a dress and not just the top. So I will be providing all the links that you need down below if you want to purchase this pattern for yourself. It's available on Etsy as a PDF, and yeah, let's get started. So as you can see, this is just a standard red button down that I'll be working with. Okay, so I am going to be manipulating all the pattern pieces. Starting with the cup, I am going to be removing roughly 4 inches from the cup by overlapping my pieces. I know this seems like a lot, but in my experience, if you have a small bust, you don't want a lot of gathering in fabric to draw attention. Then I taped my pattern pieces together, lining up my bottom seams. Then I used a French curve to redraw the top of the pattern piece. The original design had a bit of a ruffle above the elastic, but I opted to remove that by taking off a 1/2 inch from the top of the cup. Next, I needed to redraw the bottom of the cup. In the top version of this that I ended up making, I removed more of the cup during the sewing process. So I am just trying to remove it in the pattern drafting process instead. First, I went in with a pencil, then back over it with my marker with the French curve. Then I made sure to trace all my markings before cutting out my adjusted pattern piece. Moving on to my front bodice pieces, both of them fit well. I just needed to extend the length of them. I taped my pattern piece to a piece of paper and added 4.5 inches to the bottom of the bottom piece before cutting it out. Then repeated the same process for the other side. For the back bodice, I repeated the same process of adding 4.5 inches. Once that was done, I split my pattern into 2 pieces because I am going to use the side that is cut on the fold as my shearing panel. Then added a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then I just had to add back the seam allowance to the other half of the back panel. So I added a 1 inch strip to add back the seam allowance I lost, plus the additional 1/2 inch from the piece's seam allowance. To make my skirt pattern pieces, I mapped out where my waist would hit on my pattern and then traced out a skirt from an existing dress to complete my pattern piece. Okay, so now that my pattern pieces are officially cut out, it is time to start cutting my fabric, and I really hope that I have enough fabric because now that I'm looking at all the pieces, I'm like second guessing, but we will be strategic, I guess. And the most exciting thing is that I have ordered myself a few new sewing supplies, and one just came in, a new rotary blade. I know I have one right over here, but it does not work. It doesn't actually move when you push it, so I just decided to bite the bullet and purchase myself a new one because rotary blades honestly save so much time. So I'm really excited to get to use this while cutting out my pieces. Before I can start cutting everything out, I am going to deconstruct my dress shirt so I can really maximize my fabric when cutting out my pattern pieces. Once my pieces have been cut, I am going to start with sewing the skirt of the dress together. Okay, it wouldn't be a sewing project unless I run into multiple issues, which I have. I literally just finished sewing the 2 sides to the skirt. This is the first 2 stitches I made and I already ran into issues. Anyways, so when I ever so gently wrapped this around my waist, I realized this is tiny and it doesn't actually fit me. So yeah, there's no point in continuing with what I'm working with if it's not going to fit, meaning I needed to get creative. And I just went looking through my stashes of fabric, both of my closets. Then I stumbled across this skirt in my closet. And I purchased this from Value Village with the intention to use it as fabric for projects. It's just a long denim pencil skirt. Not really pencil, just like full length. Nothing crazy, but I think it would be kind of cool to maybe do the placket with this to kind of extend it down the front. I hope. We'll see. Okay, because that's where I'm thinking right now. And I actually really like the skirt itself, and I have enough fabric here that I can actually keep this as a pencil skirt and rework it because it is too large. So I'm gonna save the rest of the skirt for another project, but yeah, I'm going to try to salvage this project with this denim. But before I can even get to incorporating the denim into the dress, I am going to build out the dress as much as I can until I get to this point, just so I can get the fit the most accurate as I can, because clearly I'm struggling today. Okay, moving on to the bodice of the dress, I'm going to sew with right sides together, the back two side pieces together. LOL, okay, so I caught my second mistake, but again, I caught it, thankfully. So this is the panel I cut to be my shearing panel, but the measurement I took from the original top was after it was done, and I didn't add extra because I was not thinking again. So that's okay though, because this is less fabric, and I think I have enough from my scraps to at least add a couple more inches on either side. I'm gonna try to do at least 3 inches on either side, so that way it is actually double. So I think this is another mistake that will go unnoticed, hopefully. But just more work for me. Once I had attached my 2 new additions, this piece is now 12 inches wide. I'd rather have too much than too little at this point. To get this shearing effect, you will need elastic thread and an empty bobbin. You do need to hand wind it as opposed to the machine doing it for you, but it's honestly less time consuming than it sounds. Make sure that when you wrap your bobbin, you are holding it taut, but not actually stretching the elastic. Once it's fully wound, I inserted it into my machine as normal. Then I continued to sew straight parallel lines until I reached the other end and had something that looked like this. I then attached my shearing to my bodice pieces with right sides together. Okay, moving on to the cups. The first thing I need to do is hem the top of the cup where I'll be adding the elastic. To do this, I folded a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Before I actually sewed anything, I went in and serged the raw edges to prevent fraying. Once the hem was complete, I am going to sew my 2 gathering stitches on the bottom of the cup and start pulling it until it will fit onto our bodice. Then I am going to take a 1/4 inch elastic and cut 2 5-inch pieces. I then grabbed a safety pin and pinned it to one end of my elastic so I could feed it through. Once the elastic was all the way through, I secured it with a pin and continued to feed it with the safety pin through. And once I secured that end with a pin, I went in with a zigzag stitch to tack it into place. Then I carefully pinned the cups to the bodice, making sure to ease the fabric as I pinned to avoid any unintentional gathers. Then I sewed it into place. So right now my bodice looks something like this, and I am going to attach the skirt. To match them, I am going to fold both of them in half and mark the middle with a pin. So I just sewed the bodice to the skirt and did a fit test, and I did it off camera just because I was very exposed since it doesn't actually close in the front. And one problem I am running into, which I kind of suspected and have been thinking about how to work around this, is because the shearing gives the back an extra stretch, the butt does not have the same stretch, and I didn't account for that within my pattern, it seems like. So I didn't take any measurements. I just really wing it sometimes. It's like hilarious. I'm like, oh, I'll figure it out, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. So because I have tried it on, I do need to actually bring up the waist. It falls too low for my natural waist, so I'll be taking out probably about 2 inches worth. So again, I'm reverting to my denim fabric as my solution to all my problems. This is really gonna be an accent piece to the point where I'm like, maybe I should make it more prominent on the dress and use this as a hem as well, like a piece of this fabric on the bottom, just to make it look more cohesive with the placket as well as the straps that are also going to be denim. So I'm just trying to think of like how to cohesively make this, and I guess we'll just figure it out as I go. First, I started with trimming the skirt. So after further review, I decided to incorporate the denim fabric to the side seams of the dress, not only to add to the aesthetic, but also I needed the additional fabric added to the skirt. So off camera, I ended up seam ripping the other side seams off so I could measure out how much denim I needed to add to either side. I measured out 2-inch strips, then I did the same steps for the bodice of the dress, and I cut 2 2-inch strips that were the same length as the bodice and sewed that all together. Once the first side was sewn into place, I really liked what I saw, so I completed the other side sewing right sides together. Okay, it is officially day 2 of this dress, and I've decided that the longer it takes me to finish a project, the less effort I'm going to be putting into my appearance, because I am not really wearing any makeup aside from my eyebrows, and my hair could be less greasy, that's for sure, but it's COVID, so I don't care. So I hope you don't either. So as of now, I have officially added the denim panels to my dress, and honestly, it is such a vibe. I am so into it. I tried really hard to match up the edges, but also keep in mind that I didn't want to make the top bodice too much bigger than it was. It was more the skirt that I was trying to widen, not the bodice. So I had to be mindful of that when sewing. Anyways, so I still have quite a bit of work to do with the denim. I need to do the hem as well as the placket and then the bias around everything. And with the straps and the buttons and buttonholes. So for the placket, I am doing something similar as to when I cut out the strips for the side seams, except I'm making them wider by 1/2 inch, so totaling 2.5 inches wide. I cut 2 pieces that matched the length of the skirt as well as 2 pieces that matched the length of the bodice and serged the edges before pinning the bodice and skirt placket piece together before sewing. Then I pinned my placket to the dress and sewed it into place and repeated the same for the other side. Once that was done, the next step was to fold the placket over and pinned that into place before sewing 2 rows of top stitching. Because my dress was red, I decided to do all the top stitching also in red. Once that is done, I am moving on to the bias/straps. And to do this, I needed to make myself bias tape with the leftover denim fabric. To do this, I am going to fold over the corner of the fabric to find the bias. Then I am going to use that fold line as a guide to cut 2-inch strips. Once my strips were cut, I placed right sides together to create a right angle and sewed my pieces together until I had one long continuous piece. So this is the part where you technically could use a bias tape maker, which I did order, but unfortunately it didn't get here in time for the video. So my solve was to use my metal ruler as a guide to fold over the edges to create a double folded bias. Please be advised that the metal ruler does get very hot, and do not try this with a plastic ruler since it will melt. Since I was running out of patience, I decided to only iron and fold over one side of the bias tape because I'm going to take the unironed side and pin that right sides together to my dress. To attach the two, I am first going to start by finding the center of my dress by folding it in half and doing the same for my bias tape. Once it was all sewn, I am going to then double fold the bias to create a clean edge, pinning as I go, and continued all the way down to the straps as well. Okay, progress is being made very slowly. I'm kind of cheating my way with fixing the bodice. I realized I had to take it in quite a bit at the front because it started to too far apart for it to be realistic. So instead of like seam ripping everything and starting over, I just seam ripped just below this waist seam here. Then I slid this over just so I didn't have to like cut anything, and it's not permanent and I can still adjust it if I need to. And then I just secured it with top stitch. And so I actually have a hole in it right now that I'm just going to hand stitch, because I would have had to take out both of my top stitching on all sides and redo everything, and I just thought this might be a quicker solution, and so far it is. So I'm just going to close up that hole with a hand stitch and then do the other side. Moving on to my hemline, I'm going to be using stripes of the denim fabric to create my hem. And to do that, I started with cutting 3-inch strips. Then I serged them all and sewed my pieces together to create this one long strip. Before I could attach this piece to the dress, I needed to even out my hemline. So to do that, I marked with chalk and cut my new hemline. Then I attached the denim strip with right sides together. Once that was sewn, I folded up the denim 1/2 inch and sewed my final hemline. Okay, progress has been made. I just completed the hem. So now I am going to be moving on to the buttons. That is the last step. Oh, actually, I need to tack the strap down because right now I just had it pinned because I wanted to make sure I got the fit the way I wanted it before I secured these, but I'm pretty sure now that they're in a good place. So I'm gonna go ahead and tack them down. I used my buttonhole setting on my sewing machine to create the buttonholes. I was lucky enough to have enough buttons from the original shirt to use on this dress. So now I'm just hand sewing them into place. So my dress is officially complete. I mean, it's not perfect. There are definitely things that I wish I could have improved, but I'm throwing in the towel. It's as good as it's gonna get. I don't hate it. That's a win. So if you want to see how it turned out, then keep watching. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more fashion DIYs. And please let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.